Now, according to my clock, 7:02. So I'm going to call to order, excuse me, the Tuesday, January 30, 2024 meeting of the Dartmouth Conservation Commission. We do have a quorum present. Myself, Commissioners Burke, Fidget, Ross, and Watson. With that being said, I'm letting the audience know that we're conducting this meeting remotely as a result of Governor Healy's signing legislation on March 29, 2023 to further extend the hybrid remote meeting options in municipalities in the Commonwealth. She extended that option until March 31, 2025. These meetings are accessible to the public. Publication was made on our website, appropriately posted with the meeting ID and passcode. We do have a raise your hand feature. And as I always say, if all else fails, wave your hand and you will be recognized, unmuted, and allowed to say what you want relative to the topic on discussion. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of December 19, 2023. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion, we have a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. The next order of business is the approval of the field trip reports of January 9, 2024. May I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
The seconded motion. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. The third order of business is the receipt of the minutes of January 9, 2024 meeting. I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
A seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. The next order of business is to receive the minutes of the January 16, 2024 meeting. I have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Our final administrative item is to receive the minutes of the January 16, 2024 executive session. Have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. That concludes the administrative portion. We're moving now to our field trip reports. Excuse me. The first is a request for a partial certificate of compliance, DEP file 15-1577, RCC 2321, for the building and parking area. New notice of intent is required to rectify the detention basin deficit. It's on land described as map 84, lot 8-10. It's otherwise known as 267 Samuel Barnett Boulevard. Mark, what is staff's recommendation on this request?
Well, your reading of the item is fairly accurate. The order of conditions that was issued for 1577 included the building, parking area, and detention basin. Upon inspection by myself and the consultant Prime Engineering, it was determined that the building and the parking were fine. However, the detention basin was not as depicted as on the plan of record. And with some further analysis, Prime Engineering determined that it did not function with the same storage and release capacities. Therefore, realizing that the detention basin has to be modified. Prime is asking for a partial certificate of compliance for the building and parking area. They understand that they will have to file a notice of intent since the detention basin, while in the buffer zone, is right up against the edge of the wetland. They understand that and they are willing to do so. And therefore, at this point, staff is prepared to recommend partial COC with a statement that an after the fact notice of intent has to be filed to correct the detention basin deficiencies.
Okay, is there any comments by any commissioners or any questions? I don't see any. I'll entertain a motion for a partial certificate of compliance with the notation that the applicant will file an after the fact notice of intent to correct the storm basin that is non-functioning and incorrectly placed.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. We'll have a roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Our second field trip report is a request for certificate of compliance, DEP file 15-2312, RCC 2365. It's for an expired order of conditions where approved work was never initiated. It's on land described as map 97, lots 19 and 20. It's 5 Pennakees Lane. Mark, what is staff's recommendation on this request for a certificate of compliance?
Yes, the work was, or the order of conditions was issued to a previous owner. New owner purchased the property. No work that was proposed in the notice of intent that received the order under 2312 was ever initiated. The site is as it was, and therefore staff is recommending a complete certificate of compliance.
Thank you, Mark. Does any commissioner have any question? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to issue a complete certificate of compliance on DEP file 15-2312.
So moved.
Second.
The seconded motion on the floor, roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. The third field trip report is a request for a certificate of compliance, DEP file 15-2395, RCC 24-1 from Panagakis Development for the construction of a 6,600 square foot commercial building with associated parking within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 68 lot 30. It's otherwise known as 529 Fawns Corner Road. Mark, what is staff's recommendation for this request of certificate of compliance?
Yeah, upon inspection, work was done in full compliance with the plan of record. Staff is recommending a complete certificate of compliance.
Okay, does any commissioner have any questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the issuance of a complete certificate of compliance on DEP file 15-2395.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Second.
Seconded motion is on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. We're moving now to the fourth and final field trip report. It's a request for a certificate of compliance, DEP file 15-2203, RCC 24-2. It's from Sean Roberts for the construction of a medical office building with associated parking and utilities within an inland bank and bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 68, lots 29-1, 29-2, 31, and 32. It's known as 495-509 Fawns Corner Road. Mark, what is staff's recommendation on this request for a certificate of compliance?
This too, upon site inspection, work was done in complete conformity with the plan of record. Therefore, we are recommending a complete certificate of compliance.
Thank you, Mark. Does any commissioner have any questions? Not seeing any. I'll entertain a motion for the issuance of a complete certificate of compliance on DEP file 15-2203.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. We're now moving to our public hearings. And our first public hearing is a continued public hearing, DEP file 15-2697, NOI 23-36 on the notice of intent from Rockland Farm Lane LLC for the construction of a new single-family home driveway, in-ground pool, and appurtenances within bordering vegetated wetland, 100-foot buffer zone to BVW, and within land subject to coastal storm flowage. It's on land described as map 118, lot 132, and it's on Rockland Street. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Mark, is this the matter that we received a request to get a continuance and/or withdraw?
Well, it is the matter. Just a quick rewind at the January 9th meeting. They had failed to produce the revised information that we wanted, including a design of the retaining wall reviewed by a structural engineer, because it was in fact in velocity zone. And what they were depicting was a vertical wall, and that's probably not the best design for that setting. The commission, they did not have the materials. They requested another continuance. The commission granted them that continuance with the proviso that it was the last time they were going to continue. They needed to produce something for this particular meeting. As of yesterday, as we approached the deadline, actually it was 2 days ago, as we were approaching the deadline for revised filings, we received an email requesting that the commission consider a request to withdraw without prejudice. They said they would be back with a new filing when they had the appropriate materials available.
Thank you. Commissioners, is there any discussion on that request? I don't see any. I'll entertain a motion to allow the withdrawal of the application on DEP file 15-2697 without prejudice.
Excuse me.
So moved.
Second.
The seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Our second public hearing is a public hearing on DEP file 15-2713 NOI 2353. It's an after-the-fact notice of intent from Clay Gura for the unauthorized widening of a woods path, clearing and grubbing of the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The bordering vegetated wetland and the placement of a mobile home and trailer deck within 100-foot buffer zone to Lake Nokichoke. It's on lands described as map 55, lots 8 and 9. It's off of Deerfield Road. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, seconded motion. Roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Is there someone here on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, Rich Riom, Prime Engineering. We prepared the plans, and as you just read, the client went without an order of conditions and cleared vegetation. He did not cut any trees and did not grub out any of the roots. So we expect the shrubs to grow back. LEC was retained to prepare a planting plan, and part of the submittal is having supplemental plantings that have habitat value and are appropriate for those areas. The client did go in and put appropriate silt control measures, and right now it's not the growing season, so basically if we get permission from the commission, nothing would be done until we get out of the winter months. But he is prepared to go in and replant the area and make sure that there's no impact to the wetlands.
Thank you, Rich. Mark, I'd like to hear staff's comments on this request.
I think Rich's comments were pretty accurate. I do have some things to add. If the commission will remember, this filing is the result of an enforcement order which was issued to Mr. Gura and his wife for actions that violated the Wetlands Protection Act, not only on his property, but we had to include within that enforcement order DNRT, Dartmouth Natural Resources Trust, because he gained access across their property, damaged wetlands on their property, and therefore enforcement orders are attached to the property and the property owners. So they are included as innocent victims, but certainly a party to the action that took place. We've spent several weeks, months discussing the restoration plan, and Rich Rayom is correct that there was no grubbing, so we will allow some credit for natural revegetation to take place. However, staff did require augmented plantings. LEC did come in and prepare a plan. I'm pretty much developed the erosion control on both lots, lot 8, which I believe is the DNRT lot, and lot 9, which is the Gera lot. The interesting thing about lot 9 is lot 9 has no frontage on anything. It is granted access through a narrative description in the deed to which DNRT holds, but it does not, it only states, and I'm paraphrasing here, access shall be granted across such land to the rear lot. There is no easement, there is no surveyed access location. The RV that Mr. Gera pulled across DNRT land and parked on his land is, of a large scale. It is a trailer type. So big swings. There was some widening of, I guess what I would call a cart path, all the way in. And he certainly settled that unit on the particular site in the buffer zone to Lake Nokichoke. This particular proposal is to allow for the restoration. We are aware that the RV is there, but the RV is subject to a town bylaw, chapter 375, mobile homes, RVs, and trailers, and has to go through an approval process just to be put on a piece of land, which is outside of our jurisdiction. I believe that falls within the select board's jurisdiction with some commentary from the building commissioner / zoning agent. So having said all that, we need to correct this problem. I think the plans that are presented do a good job of correcting the problem. Whether the RV stays there or not is certainly subject to future review by maybe this commission and certainly the select board. But at this juncture, staff is prepared to recommend a standard order of condition, inclusive of our standard restoration conditions as per the plans, existing conditions, erosion control, and restoration plans prepared by Prime Engineering and dated 12/7/2023, with 2 specific provisos in the conditions. That all work will be completed by June 14th of 2024. Reason for that is this project has labored well over a growing season already, and needs to be wrapped up very quickly. And specifically, I want to make note of the fact that the applicant must comply and show proof of compliance with chapter 375 of the town bylaws. While not in our direct jurisdiction, it has a direct effect on what the ultimate use of the property is, and I feel it's appropriate to include that as a condition.
I have a question. Since the placement of the mobile home is outside of our jurisdiction, I'm not so sure I agree. We have the right
Percent of the
to,
mobile home is not outside of our jurisdiction.
well,
It's
it's,
in our jurisdiction.
if it's in our jurisdiction, then the order of conditions that's sought should be complete. It's not. Because if it's in our jurisdiction, they would have needed our permission to put it there, right?
Yeah.
So this isn't a order of conditions request that restores anything. The restoration would have to also be to get our permission to put the trailer there. This is incomplete, okay? And I understand we don't have the right to say you can't have it there in terms of that chapter 375. Our jurisdiction is whether or not you have the right to put it in the buffer zone as it relates to the town of Dartmouth wetlands bylaws and the state regulations regarding wetlands. So that's a different area. The town may inquire as to, health issues such as where's the sewage going, all that other stuff. Whatever they look at, which is beyond our control. But I think the cart is before the horse in terms of the trailer. They should have gotten permission under chapter 375 to put the trailer there, number one, and then come before us for permission under an order of conditions. So this isn't, I mean, to me, this is it's an after the fact, but it's only for the restoration. And if they have to pull that out, they're going to have to restore it again.
Could I speak on the matter?
Yeah, you can speak on it.
The bylaw, the town zoning bylaw, allows the storage of a trailer such as this without special permit, variance, or anything from the selectmen. So it can be stored year round. What it can't be is occupied without permission from the selectmen. They can grant 2 weeks, and upon request, they can grant a second 2 weeks for the occupancy. And that's a special permit from the selectmen that has not yet been sought. But the storage of the trailer in terms of the zoning bylaw is as a matter of right.
All right, so then if what I'm hearing from you is correct, you're saying, well, they're only going to use this for storage, and if they want to use it for more than 2, possibly 4 weeks habitation, they have to get a special permit from the select board. So I would suggest that we go back to the drawing board here on this request and put in relative to this trailer that we're okay with it as a conservation commission, okay? Then we can say we're back to what happened here, which was, a violation of our jurisdiction by not only disturbing the wetlands and buffer zone, but also by putting the trailer there without permission. So I think this NOI has to be amended to include the trailer and its location, knowing full well that if it's habitated for more than 2 weeks or possibly 4, if the select board grants it, they're going to need a special permit. And I'm assuming that, Rich, you're right, there are no other relief, zoning relief, Board of Health relief, or anything else they need to have it there. But from our standpoint, this is incomplete from my view. I can't agree to just say the restoration's fine and then they got a trailer there, which shouldn't be. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, could we have a 4-week continuance in order to just perfect the record? If the notice and the legal ad did not include the trailer, then we'd have to have a new legal ad and new notice to abutters. If it
I think
didn't,
that's right.
if it did mention the trailer, then it may just require modification to the narrative.
Well, I'm more than happy, as speaking for myself, to provide that time. I really want to get this correctly, and I don't think we want to do it piecemeal and have a problem where we have a trailer that's unpermitted and we've got an approval of an order of conditions, which is incomplete.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I say something?
Yeah, go right ahead.
And I think too, if the applicant was going to use the premise that it was gonna be storage, and Mr. Garrett did say that there was potentially some damages to the buffer zone and stuff when it was brought in, then if it's just storage, it's gonna be brought out to go somewhere in theory, then the damages would be redone after the restoration. So I think the storage thing doesn't really work either.
Well, you raise a good point there, Kyle, and I will say that one of the things when I was listening to the narrative and listening to Mark, I said, well, we also have to put a condition on that any movement of the trailer will require another filing, including the removal of the trailer.
Yeah.
Or the replacement of the trailer. So, I mean, it's got to be pretty clear. We're not giving a blank check here, okay? That's one of the reasons why I want it to be complete, so that we know exactly what we're voting on. It covers the situation as it is now. And we give the warning in our conditions that don't go moving that trailer without coming back.
If I could interject just for the record, a couple of points here. First of all, while Rich is correct that zoning does allow for the storage, this is not a storage issue. They put this in as a second recreational vehicle. They live in Rhode Island. They come down here to fish, and they've got a porch. They've got a bunch of stuff out there. This ain't going anywhere. This is not a storage situation where somebody's parking a trailer here in the off season to move it to another location. This is its location. So I don't think that has merit. To Mike's question about the incompleteness of the notice does speak to clearing and the issues related to the buffer zone and to the bordering vegetated wetland. And then, as we read, and the placement of the mobile home and trailer deck within the 100-foot buffer zone. So the request is actually for both. And while I don't think we can grant exclusively the approval of the placement overall townwide, I think that we can approve its placement subject to where it is in the buffer zone. It was put in a clearing. It really has not impacted anything. They should have asked for permission. They did not. They're asking after the fact. And my thought process on this was they need to show proof. They need to comply with Chapter 375 and show us proof, or the vehicle has to be removed. And at that juncture, that vehicle has to be, that would have to be removed, I think, within the confines of the enforcement order. I don't think we need another notice for that. And that's got to get out of there before they restore, because they can't be, restoring, then banging that up and going back. So I think there is an order to this. I respect Mike's interpretation on this, but I think we have worked this to work out appropriately and sequence it appropriately.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and my concern is this. What was talked about at first was the restoration plan. Now it's but the request was the restoration plan and being able to place a trailer where it is in the buffer zone. So I'd like to hear staff's comments with that, not including whether or not it's there legally under Chapter 375, because that's not our jurisdiction. So looking at our jurisdiction, assuming that they had the permission for it to be there, does it comply with our regulations and our performance standards? And are we cleared under staff's review to say, okay, from a conservation standpoint? And then we could say, this is our approval, doesn't do anything regarding chapter 375. And if they have to move it, they got to come back to us with another notice of intent to move it. Okay, and they got to restore whatever they've damaged in removing it. Now, I mean, that to me is pretty straightforward. For us to say, we're going to give you permission to restore it, but it's conditioned on you getting, what are we doing here? I mean, I'm just confused of sequentially of approving a restoration and saying, oh, by the way, you got to prove to us you can keep the trailer there. What are we going to do if they don't get approval under 375? Are we going to then say, oh, order of
Then they have to remove it.
are revoked? That means you can't restore it? I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure I know what we're doing here. That's my point. I can't vote for this not knowing what I'm doing.
As a matter of right, the trailer can stay there. In other words, it doesn't need a special permit from the selectmen to stay there year round. But I think to occupy it, I think each year they would have to go to the selectmen. The selectmen can give permission, special permit can be good for a year or two, but I don't think the selectmen would be willing to give permission for 2 weeks of occupancy for an indefinite period. I think they'd want to have control to make sure that everything was done properly each year.
Let
but-
me interject here, because I agree with what you've just said, Rich. I don't think they can give you a special permit in perpetuity running with the land. It's going to be a reviewable special permit. That's what the town does. So most of the towns do, right? So I'm inclined to give you my personal feeling is to give you the 4 weeks that you asked for, in which time get a letter from the building department saying that what you just said, that the trailer doesn't require any zoning relief for being a trailer there. If your client, but if it's to be used for occupation, more than the 2 weeks, they have to go before the select board for that, or it's illegal. And then what we can then do is then I want to hear from our staff that the trailer's not a problem from a conservation standpoint. And we can then vote to issue, the requested relief, which is both the restoration plan and the location of the trailer with the conditions that are likely to be imposed. And one of the conditions would also be, in my opinion, if that trailer moves or has to be moved, the applicant must come back before doing anything, because we have to get another order of conditions for that. And there will be another restoration plan for the damage caused and moving it out. Okay, so I mean, as long as we're clear on that, I think that's the path forward, more than just voting a partial right now and then having a condition that says, well, if you don't get this 375, and how do we know? If you're correct, you're never going to get anything from the town, right? You're just going to use it for 2 weeks at a time without having to go and get anything.
No, you can't even use it for the 2 weeks.
Or
with-
whatever it is. I don't know what
No,
chapter 75 is. So
You cannot occupy it for 1 hour without the selectmen's special permit. They have the ability to give you 2 weeks, and the bylaw just happens to say, and in special cases, they can allow you an extra 2 weeks. But you can store it on the site as a matter of right. You can't occupy it at all without a special permit from the selectmen.
gotcha. Well, I mean, if all that is correct, I think a letter from the building department would probably be sufficient for that. So we're not really going to condition it on that. In my view, that'd be beyond the pale for us. But I'd like to have this decision reflect what was requested, which was more than just a restoration plan.
Okay, so could we continue to February 27th?
February 27th. No, yeah, that would be our last meeting in February, excuse me. I mean, that should be a public meeting. Do any
Schedule a public meeting.
any commissioners want to be heard on this? I mean, I've been doing all the talking with Rich and Mark, so I don't want to cut anybody else out. Okay, I don't see any. At the request of the applicant, we have before us a request for a continuance of this matter until our February 27, 2024 public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
We have a
Second.
motion on the floor, seconded motion on the floor. So we're gonna go with a roll call vote on this. And I'm gonna go Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So that motion passes unanimously. And Rich, I think your easiest course of action there is just get something from the building inspector that is exactly what you said, bring that in, and then, you know, I'd like to hear then from staff whether or not this location of the trailer or the trailer at that location has, it meets any of our performance standards for where it is, and if it does, then that should be permitted as well under the NOI.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay, we're moving on now to our third public hearing. It's a public hearing, DP file 15-2716, NOI 2356, on notice of intent from John Kopacheski to construct a stone wall and a single pole osprey nest and permission for the existing gravel driveway, stone retaining wall, and hydro seeding. It's within a bordering vegetated wetland, on bordering land subject to flooding, and on land subject to coastal storm flowage. It's on land described as map 112, lot 30. It's otherwise known as 16 Bourne Place. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Kyle,
Yes.
Nat,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Do we have somebody here this evening on behalf of the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Sean Leach for Northeast Engineers representing John Kopacheski, 16 Bourne Place.
Thank you.
This is probably familiar to the commission as it's been in front of you several times in the last couple of months. I'll share my screen if I can.
You may.
Try that. There you go. Okay, did everybody see the screen?
I can. Yeah, I can. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a house that's been constructed at 16 Bourne Place, and there was an order of conditions, and there were several order conditions to this property to clear brush. And recently, I think in the last month or so, a couple of certificate of compliances have been issued regarding the clearing of brush and some other things, but there were some outstanding issues, and there was some new work requested from the applicant. So it was Mark had decided that it was in the best interest to wrap this all into one little neat package and apply for this thing as one new notice of intent. So what we're here for tonight for is to ask for a couple of things. One is the construction of a new wall and an osprey nest here in the Phragmites, very low monopole osprey nest. That's the new work. This wall would be the new work. And also the retaining wall at the base of the slope of the existing dwelling. We also have hydroseeded the area. It was hydroseeded late. There isn't a lot of stabilization here, but we're asking for that as part of this. Originally, this was incorporated in the original order condition for the house, of which you issued a partial certificate of compliance about a month ago. And also there's a driveway over here that was not shown on the original plan, even though it's outside the 100-foot buffer zone, it is within the flood zone. So we're asking for in order conditions that includes the driveway, the wall, the osprey nest, and then this wall along the property line that's within the buffer zone and in velocity zone, as well as the hydro seeding to stabilize the property around the existing homes.
Thank you, Sean. Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does.
Alrighty. Mark, what is staff's recommendation on Mr. Kopacheski's request?
I think, you know, the four project elements, the osprey pole and the stone wall to the west are the new requests. When we were doing, if you remember, we required an as-built plan as part of the certificate of compliance request, in which we issued a partial under file number, I believe it was 2455. And we observed that a retaining wall and that existing driveway to the southeast were added to the the site. And we also noticed that there was, during the process, that there was some, the site had not been stabilized. So we suggested that they get hydro seed down, which they did do. It was late in the season. Some of it did come in, as late in the season was extended a little bit, and obviously we've had some warm conditions. The site is fairly stable. The stone wall behind the house, is a placed stone wall. It's not mortared in any way. Seems very natural. It's outside of the wetlands. It's within the building perimeter. So it was an added feature, so staff did not think it was that significant. And at this juncture, staff is prepared to issue a standard order of, recommends issuing a standard order of condition as per the plan entitled Plan to Accompany Notice of Intent, prepared by Northeast Consulting, and dated December 16th, 2023. With an added condition, there is only a partial certificate of compliance, so there will need to be, once the grass comes in and as such, that a complete COC be filed for an issue to close out 2455. And then once this project goes on, we then will issue, we will deal with a second order of condition, a second certificate of compliance dealing with file number 2716. We're trying to get the number of open orders closed, and we would function under the currently existing file number 2716, which is what we're hearing tonight.
Okay, what was the number of the one that you alluded to? They have that.
2455, I think. I didn't jot it down, but it's kind of burned in my head.
So I'm sorry, can you say it one more time? I didn't quite hear it.
152455.
2455. Okay. 152455. I've written it down. Okay, do any commissioners have any questions? Is there anyone in the audience that wants to be heard on this matter? I don't see anybody. I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion for the issuance of a standard order of conditions on the plan submitted by the applicant on December 16, 2023, with the condition that the applicant will need to file for a certificate of compliance on 15-2455 once the plantings have been stabilized, and then subsequently come in for a once they complete all the work on file. Let me get the number correct here. On file
15-2716.
2716. Once that has been complete, to come in for a certificate of compliance on that. So we'll have requirements for 2 certificates of compliance. But anyway, I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
The seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Sean.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
All right.
We're going on to our 4th public hearing, which is a public hearing on DEP file 15-2718, NOI 24-1 from David Silvera to construct a single-family dwelling with associated grading and utilities within the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 169, lot 195, is otherwise known as 6 Berkshire Street. I entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second.
The seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Is there someone here this evening on behalf of the applicant David Silvera?
There is, for the record, Stevie Cavallo of Farland Corp.
Good
Um,
evening.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if it makes sense to open the next public hearing, seeing as the plan that was prepared for this one also shows the next one. They're kind of adjacent lots, with utility easements kind of running through both, so I just kind of suggested that in case it makes it easier for everybody to.
I think what I have to do, Stevie, I have to go, we have to have one hearing on this and open the other, but unless there's some grave concerns of any of the commissioners or staff, I don't mind if you do your presentation on both, and that we'll just open it and vote the second one.
Fair enough. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Yes, it is.
It says it's disabled.
Oh, I don't see anything, but it doesn't, I don't even have I don't have any words at all, nothing. Does any other commissioner see something?
I I'm not gonna open it up because I don't have anything to share, but I have the icon
Oh,
at the
it
bottom.
came up now. Okay, can everyone see that?
Now I
Yes.
can. Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Okay, so this public hearing is for 6 Berkshire Street, which is this lot here. This project actually has been before the commission in the past. Previous notice of intent included extension of Berkshire Road here, as well as Middlesex Avenue. There was some wetland restoration work, replication work that was performed in this area here associated with the wetland crossing. That work's been completed. I believe a partial certificate of compliance has been issued for both of those. What we're here before the commission proposing is construction of single-family dwellings on 6 Berkshire. We've got a proposed three-bedroom dwelling. Utilities would be serviced across this lot, 196, which is 68 Middlesex Avenue, with access off of Berkshire. Proposed grading, and we're trying to keep everything minimal as far as disturbance. Driveway is kind of long, but that was actually permitted as part of the previous notice of intent. Municipal water and sewer, that's about it. Erosion controls are still kind of in place, but we have proposed additional erosion controls along the limit of work. That's the scope of the project for 6 Berkshire. 68 Middlesex is essentially the same. This driveway already exists. They're looking to extend it and construct a single-family dwelling. Again, public utilities off of Middlesex Avenue, minimal grading, and additional erosion controls. This has been reviewed by Department of Public Works. They've essentially approved it with just a few minor conditions with regards to the proposed easement being recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you, Stevie. Mark, I'd like to hear comments staff has, not only as to this, but as to the companion number 5.
Yeah, I think it was a good approach to at least talk about them together because they are so interrelated. But we would have to vote separately on each file number. Essentially, just to bring you back, several weeks back, we issued 2 partial orders of, I don't know why I keep doing this, 2 partial certificates of compliance, one on file number 2358 and one on 2359, both of which were on the proposal to develop each one of these sites, requiring a wetland crossing, requiring wetland replication, to access one and possibly two, depending on the way access was going, residential units. What happened was that the wetland impacts on both Middlesex and Berkshire took place. The restoration took place. The restoration was done appropriately, but staff was very uncomfortable with issuing a complete certificate of compliance because we had no justification for the impact in the initial impact. The access impact was going nowhere since there was no houses were built. My understanding was that there was a real estate transaction between the previous owner, Robert Pyers, and the new owners or new potential owners. I don't exactly know what the status is right at the moment. South Coast Development. So we issued the partial to suggest that the wetland work was done appropriately, but we required prior to getting a complete certificate of compliance on each of these, that a notice of intent for both houses be applied for, which is what we're doing tonight. And having said that, the houses as proposed are pretty consistent. Positioning shifts a little bit, but it has very little to do with wetland jurisdiction in terms of changing impacts one way or another. The grading is largely the same. The replication wetland is in place. I was out there last week, and given winter conditions, it looked really good. The stuff looked really healthy. So I think we're well on our way on that end. And I think that approval of both 2718, the Berkshire Street site, and 2717, the Middlesex Avenue site, justifies the approval of the impacts way back when. So what staff is proposing is recommending to the commission is to issue a standard order of conditions as per the site plan, which you're looking at right now, prepared by Fallen Corp, dated January 10th, 2024, with the additional condition that they need to apply for a complete certificate of compliance to fully close out file number 2358. And we have a condition built into the standard order where compliance of all other departments is required. They basically comply with DPW. As Steve said, they have two easement issues that need to be recorded, and that has little to do with conservation, and those are the only outstanding DPW comments at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Okay, commissioners, any questions? I don't see any. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak on this application? Don't see any. So at this juncture, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing on DEP file 15-2718.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion to issue a standard order of conditions on the site plan presented by applicant on January 10, 2024, with the condition that the applicant apply for a certificate of compliance on DEP file 15-2358. And when the work has been completed on DEP file 15-2718, the applicant will apply for a separate certificate of compliance for that work.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. We're now moving on to the fifth and final of our public hearings, DEP file 15-2717, NOI 24-2, David Silvera seeking to construct a single-family dwelling with associated grading and utilities within the 100-foot buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland. It's on land described as map 169, lot 196. It's otherwise known as 68 Middlesex Avenue. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading.
So moved.
Second,
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we've already heard from the applicant's engineer, Stevie Carvalho. We've also already heard from our staff, Mark Garrett, regarding both this proposal and the previous one which we voted on. They were presented at the same time for efficiency's sake. Do you have any questions regarding the proposal 15-2717, or would you like to ask any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment?
Sure.
My discussion is mostly consistent with what I presented under 2718 as you cited. However, there is one minor change. The COC to close out the previous file number, the file number in this case is 2359, not 2358, as was the previous.
2359. Thank you, Mark. Good catch. Okay, does any commissioner have any questions? All right, I do not see any. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to be heard on this request? Once again, I don't see anybody. So at this juncture, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, as we did with the previous, and the date on that plan is the same, Mark, I take it?
It is the same plan, yes.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to issue a standard order of conditions on the site plan prepared by the applicant and submitted January 10, 2024, with the condition that the applicant apply for and get a certificate of compliance on DEP file 15-2359. And afterwards, when all the work on DEP file 15-2717 has been completed, to apply for a certificate of compliance on DEP file 15-2717.
So moved.
Second,
Seconded motions on the floor. Roll call vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jim?
yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Stevie.
Thank you.
We're now moving on to our items for discussion. Any bills?
No.
I see that Buddy Baker's here. I would like to take Buddy first before we go into anything else and then go back.
I'm comfortable with that. I was gonna suggest the same thing.
Okay. So, Buddy, if you want to unmute yourself, your floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I appreciate your time and putting me on the agenda. I'm the current chair of the Community Preservation Committee in town. As folks know, we review proposals and make recommendations to town meeting for the investment of Community Preservation Act funding, CPA funds. A major component of funding in the town of Dartmouth has been open space preservation. It's probably represents a little more than 60% of the funds since 2002 have been committed to open space projects. A little more than $9 million in CPA funds. Probably a little more than 700 acres of open space have been preserved through the CPA projects, and probably another 230 or so acres of agricultural land. So open space preservation is a really a significant activity of the CPA fund in Dartmouth. Recently, there's a opinion by the state environmental agency, Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, who is responsible for reviewing conservation restrictions. An opinion that the procedure for issuing for the procedure for using CPA funds for conservation restrictions, in their view, in this administration's view, current administration's view, should have been done differently. Town council had several conversations with the state. The state agreed to allow to work with the and approve the conservation restriction on the project that was in front of them. That was a Russell Mills land conservation acquisition. But with the understanding that going forward, we would approach the funding of conservation restrictions differently, and more and in compliance with their view of how the Community Preservation Act intended. So the CPA requires that when CPA funds are used, that the town acquire a real property interest. And that can be done either by the town acquiring property directly, like recently we approved CPA funds for the Pascamasket land, in which the town is going to be acquiring land along the Pascamasket River. In the case of where a private entity, and I think a good example of that primarily in our town has been acquisitions that have been sponsored by the DNRT. When a conservation restriction is purchased by the town, so CPA funds are used for the purchase of the conservation restriction, the restriction represents the town's real property interest and therefore is compliant with the intent of the legislation. In the past, we have funded the value of the conservation restriction with CPA funds, but the town has not always been the actual holder of the restriction. So sometimes Buzzards Bay Coalition, for instance, has been the holder of a restriction. What we need to be going forward is, in these instances, the funding for the CPA, so if the town approves CPA funds in a future land acquisition project, the funds would go to the town for the purpose of purchasing the conservation restriction on a piece of property. And by granting that to the town, the restriction, the town has established a real property interest, and in doing so has then protected the land from development and hence preserved it for open space and recreation. So I want to raise that because our projects have not always required the town to be the holder of the restriction, but as far as I can tell, going forward on projects that might be sponsored, say by DNRT or another, say, nonprofit like Buzzards Bay Coalition, the way that we can support these projects and preserve this land is going to be through the town's purchasing of the conservation restriction. So the CPA funds would flow to the town. The town would then buy the restriction from the entities who's acquired the land for the purpose of holding it in perpetuity. So I just want to raise that because if you have questions, but we haven't always done it that way. So I think I appreciate, Mark, that, more of these may come the direction of the town through the Conservation Commission than have in the past. So I thought, I think Kyle, you probably had raised that, you know, from being at our meeting or something like that, which I appreciate. So I didn't know if there was any questions. I kind of wanted to explain that, so that in the future, I think you'd be aware of why you might be seeing more of our projects coming through the Conservation Commission.
Buddy, I thought you did a really good job of making some sense out of this. It was very clear. It was very clear, and I do appreciate that you took the time this evening to help us, enlighten us on this. I have a question though, and my question is this, and I don't even know if we can, if it would even be allowed, but what if the cost of a CPA was more than the town was willing to commit, and a third party like a DNRT or Friends of Trustees, etc., they were going to kick in some money as well? Would the state allow us to be the co-holders of a conservation restriction?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, so, you know, I can't venture to guess at how the, you know, town council probably could give us an opinion on that. From a layperson's point of view, I think as long as the town had a stake in the ownership of that restriction, I would think that it would be seen as complying with the law. But I can certainly forward that question on, and because it would be helpful for us in the at the CPC, because I think if we do, many times we'll get what we call kind of consultation requests, and people are considering different projects, and they'll approach the committee, and we offer opinions about both eligibility as well as some advice about a good way to structure something. That's probably a good thing for us to know, because I think in future land acquisitions, we're going to have to advise people about how to engage the town before they apply for submit a proposal. So I think that's the other piece is you all would need to know that we have a sponsor's intent is to acquire property with CPA funds, ergo requiring the town's participation. But I will check on that question.
Thank you. Commissioners, now's your chance to get. Now, Joe, you've got a question? Go right ahead.
Yes, Buddy,
Yeah.
does this change affect the ability of the acquiring agencies, conservation, DNRT versus Bay Coalition, to have any say in the usage of the land or any changes in the land, or is that solely the responsibility of the town? And I'm thinking, where is this going with the town controlling everything? Does it mean that low-income housing will become an issue as far as conservation land? Or I'm just throwing out that as an example. Who has say in how the land is used or how the conservation easement is applied?
Yeah, so I think in envisioning these, I think as an example with say in the future DNRT acquiring, having a piece of property they want to acquire and preserve, DNRT has a particular interest in the terms of that conservation restriction. And so I think there's probably going to be a little bit more of coordination up front about that in the way it has been done in the past when another entity has held the restriction. DNRT has had the ability to write the terms of the conservation restriction, and in places like Dyke Creek, working out the agricultural use and open space was important. And there's some also access to hiking trails and things like that. There are definitely terms that are of particular importance to, say, a sponsor like DNRT. And so what I envision, Joe, is that the projects really won't work and go forward if a conservation restriction is at odds with what the intent of the sponsor is in holding a piece of land, acquiring a piece of land. And so it's probably something that those terms would have to be worked out and understood between the town and the sponsor. Just so things like the town, won't find itself at odds with what the long-term intent of the owner is with these properties. So we haven't run into that at all, because they've been very much fine-tuned to whatever degree DNRT or Buzzards Bay has needed those restrictions to reflect what they're doing. Usually it's balancing agricultural use and open spaces, typically what they have to be careful about. But I think it's just going to require more upfront work with the town.
Thanks, buddy.
Mike, if I could comment, having many a conservation restriction. And my comments should not be taken as being adversarial to conservation restrictions. However, there is a practical matter. When you're the holder of a conservation restriction, there are monitoring requirements that have to be fulfilled. I will tell you right now, the town holds about 15 conservation restrictions, and in the 9 years that I've been here, I don't think any of them have been monitored. We just don't have the time or the staffing to do that. And it has been a concern that I have voiced, not necessarily against conservation restrictions, but how they are properly employed. And I understand what Buddy is saying, that, the town, if CPC is contributing CPA funds in the name of the town has to have some real interest in the property. And typically, unless the town is outright buying the property, which we generally wouldn't be, we would be partnering with somebody. Our partnership is generally a minority partnership.
Mhm.
And it's the holding of the restriction, which then places certain responsibilities on the holder. Now, I can tell you personally, I worked on a project in a neighboring town, and we could not get a third party to hold the conservation restriction. I happen to be under contract with the state, and I compared my contract with the requirements of the conservation restriction holder, and I met 98% of them. I held the conservation restriction personally on a piece of property. And it was for a 3-year period, and then the state took it over. But that required me every year going out and monitoring it was about a 45-acre parcel, so it wasn't a huge parcel, but I had to walk the perimeter of that parcel. I had to look at the condition of that parcel and make a report to the Department of Conservation Services and the property owner as to the condition. And it's not just the Conservation Commission saying to Buddy, oh yeah, that's a great idea, we're going to do this. I think that it gets a little bit bigger, because we hold a lot of property. The Conservation Commission holds a lot of property that none of us have ever seen. And that to me is a scary proposition. And we acquire open space for wonderful reasons. But most, if not all, the open space we own as a default condition is unmanaged open space. We don't even know what it looks like. We don't even know what the property bounds are. So I'm putting my professionalism in here beyond just my role as the environmental affairs coordinator, and I've been waiting for a moment. I wasn't expecting this to be the moment, but I've been waiting for a moment where we have to ask ourselves, okay, this is what we want to do. This is the price of doing it. And now the hearing administration and Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs is taking a different approach, and it seems to be a less casual approach about this. And they want to hold parties responsible for their stake in ownership. And the partnerships we have are great with DNRT, Bay Coalition trustees. It's not there's not an internal problem, but it's when you hold a role, you have to fulfill that role. And I'm leery. I'll put it that way. I'm leery as to our abilities as we are currently structured to meet the real mandates. And it sounds like this administration is ratcheting down on some of those mandates. I think there's a bigger discussion that has to occur here beyond just this group. But I think this is a great start, and we have to think about how we want to do this, because I don't question the value of the overall program. We have to be able to meet our responsibilities. So that I worry about the unintended liabilities that may come along with not meeting our responsibilities.
I had the same comments and concerns as you, Mark, and I was thinking the answer to Mike's question may be the solution to that. However, even if we were able to, jointly hold the CR with DNRT, an example, does that in any way absolve the town, even if it's, we're partnering with someone? I would imagine we would still both then be responsible for monitoring that property.
I think the answer to that, Matt, is if we can co-hold, then the CR is going to have to spell out who's doing what.
Okay.
As far as the co-holders are concerned. Because otherwise there would be, to use the parlance of, well, if Richard was here, he'd know, there'd be joint and several liability, which means we'd be responsible 100% for doing everything we're supposed to do. So the agreements will have to be drafted differently if we're allowed to co-hold, so that the allocation of responsibilities is clear in the CR.
Even if we held it on our own, could it be written in the restriction that like DNRT takes care of the monitoring of the property?
Well, what
Good.
we would have to do then, Kyle, I would think, if we're the holder of the CR, the obligations on us, we'd have to engage some third party to do the monitoring, and
Right,
probably going to be an associated cost with that. So
absolutely,
do we have the money in our budget to pay somebody to do it?
right.
I think Mark's point is very salient, because up to this point, the town, in my view, hasn't done its job as the holder of a CR. Okay? Nobody's called us on it, but that we haven't. And so in the future, that might not be something we can scalely avoid. All right? If people start holding our feet to the fire and looking for reports, we're going to have to get them out there, which might mean hiring more people to do just that. And if you've got a problem where you don't have the staff, the last thing you want to do is make it a bigger problem by adding more work when there's no one who can do it.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a good question that Mark raised, or a good point that he raised. And I think there's got to be some creative solutions, because I don't think Dartmouth is unique in the Commonwealth where we don't have the resources to comply with the monitoring required by CRs. If we are, I'd be surprised. I don't think we are. Enough off my soapbox. But anyone else want to ask Buddy a question or make a statement? We've got him here now, so I'm going to let him go so he can get some rest.
Well,
right.
I will follow up on the co-ownership question. Try to get an answer to that. I think the other piece is it probably would be helpful to kind of sketch out a bit of what the process would be, so we can kind of advise, let's say, if, the trust for public land is interested in doing a project, acquiring some land, You know, there's some preliminary, there's probably a process to take with Conservation Commission, you know, putting you all on notice, you know, being clear about what the terms of the CR would be so that there's no surprises at the end. Those sorts of things. What I think what we may do at the CPC is kind of think through a little bit of what the steps might be. I don't know, Mark, if that makes sense for us to attempt to try to draw out, you know, if someone wanted to propose acquiring land for preservation as open space, how should they engage this Conservation Commission prior to submitting a proposal? And what are the things we'd want to make sure sponsor had worked out with the Conservation Commission so that, again, in the 11th hour, there's not a surprise when the sponsor says, gee, I can't live with that kind of a CR. I can't live with those terms, kind of a thing.
I think my response, buddy, is that the Conservation Commission, if the ownership issue is going to take the bend that you describe, and I don't think you're off base, I think that's an accurate, you know, assessment of where the state's going. I think the Conservation Commission has to be part of the discussion as to what the construct of the restriction is.
Right.
To my knowledge, based on the ones that I've dealt with in Dartmouth, we've really entrusted that to other folks, and we've kind of read it and just said, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we were signing off on something that had been prepared as opposed to being part of the preparation and speaking to the interests of the Conservation Commission, which could be different than the position of the Environmental Affairs Coordinator. I mean, it's you know, it's because ultimately when you look at these, the in all the land that we have care and custody of, it's the Conservation Commission. It's not me. I'm not the Conservation Commission. It's the entity. It's the commission. We try to represent the commission as best we can, and we try to understand the commission's position and speak for them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's their baby, not my baby or the conservation officer's baby or anybody else in the office. I mean, we hold the documents and we work with them and administer them as best we can, but we don't necessarily are the sole arbiters of what they are.
No, I think you're making a good point there, Mark, but to go to Buddy's concern, I think it might be helpful if we sort of noodled around with some language that we say we'd like to see as Conservation Commission, or even some general concepts that we would like to see as Conservation Commission in any CR in which the town or the Conservation Commission, to be more specific, is either the sole or joint holder. Then the process would be the Buddy would have something to give the applicant, saying this is what the Conservation Commission requires in any CR where they're a holder, and if they can't live with it, they can't live with it. Then the only issue that we have on a specific project is, do we want to hold it? Okay, which I think is a separate discussion. Okay, and for me, you know, that can be very helpful, because when an applicant sometimes when they give land, I know that, and we like in other venues, we like when there's a donation of land for open space, or more particularly a conservation restriction, we want a donation of money so that we can actually fund the monitoring. Okay, that's what's in some cases a requirement. Otherwise, you know, the donee, not for profit or municipal, goes broke just doing, with, you know, begging people to make donations so they can monitor land that's been donated.
Mhm.
And they're not able to acquire more land. So anyway, I make a long story longer. I think we need to think about, as a Conservation Commission, are there certain issues we would like to see, no matter what the conservation restriction is, And those will be our general, these are the things we like to see. And if it's in there and you can live with it, then we can discuss whether we want that project. We want to participate in it. And that'll be really helpful, I think, for the CPC, because then when somebody in, they'll know right away, filtering out, if they say can't live with that, okay, well, you're in the wrong venue then for us to give you any money. We can't contribute to that.
What I would suggest is, I will make a call to Conservation Services and see if I could get their boilerplate. They have a
Right.
boilerplate of conservation restrictions.
Yep.
Whomever is the entity that's working with a particular piece of land has the opportunity to kind of tweak that. And I underscore the word tweak. You really can't change the fundamentals of the CR. Because if you do, then they're not going to accept it in their program. As much as we may not accept the property because there are restrictions that we may not want or we cannot, implement, so to speak. So I would say, I will make that call and see if I can get that boilerplate and distribute it to the commission at the outset so that you guys can take a look at it and see what really the nuts and bolts of these documents are. And I think your standard conservation restriction is probably about 15 pages long. A lot of it is legal, language, but there are sections of it that are fundamental to the objectives and the do's and don'ts within the restriction. So I will do that. The second point I wanted to make, and I don't want to belabor this, but Mike, you're talking about land donations. We just went through a situation last year. We had land donated many years ago, the Jerebeck property up off of Old Fall River Road, which is a capped landfill, ash landfill, and there were requirements to monitor the groundwater and to cut vegetation to maintain the cap so that the cap did not degrade. And there was I think there was a gifting of $25,000. Well, we've spent the $25,000. And the next time we do it, which will be not this summer, but the summer of 2025, we're going to have to go to town meeting and ask for money or go to, some entity who represents the Jerebeck estate. I believe Barbara Jerebeck is still alive. I think she's in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. But somebody's going to have to get more money because we are mandated. It's one of these state mandates. This has to be done. My predecessor, Mike O'Reilly, took on the responsibility. It turns out that we may not be the care and custody people that everybody think we are in that case. I believe that the deed reads the town of Dartmouth, and does not say care and custody of conservation. And therefore, it may be a select board issue and not our issue at all. So over the years, we took it on and we did it. And that's not to say we shouldn't continue to do it, but there are a lot of issues that have kind of fallen through the cracks here. And, when you're dealing with open space, it's like any other property. You got to know what's going on. So I will request the boilerplate and get it out, distribute it as quickly as I can.
Great. And the one thing I would add is, because I think it's particular to many of the private acquisitions. One is there, and the thing that makes these projects, I think, so supported in town is that there's easy public access to a lot of these acquisitions. DNRT being a good example of trail construction and maintenance and things like that on those properties and stuff that they have they take responsibility for. And also in places like Dyke Creek, there has been sort of an approach to the agricultural landscape, if you will. So acquiring property that has been used in the past as for agricultural purposes, maintaining those landscapes. And so that they don't, in some cases, they don't basically reforest. So there are some clauses in there about mowing once a year, twice a year that the owner of the property has to do. So what I think what I'm saying is I think the boilerplate makes a whole lot of sense. It gives some predictability for folks. But there are a couple of things that I think that are not uncommon in the kinds of open space projects we've had in town, that it would be good to consider those as optional clauses that might, for some properties, be used in the boilerplate. And I think we could probably use something like the Dyke Creek CR is a good example. I think Russell Mills also has a example of that. But I think the place to start, yeah, sounds like if there's a boilerplate CR that would be typically used in these projects, that would give some predictability to folks and an opportunity to talk about the projects in their early stage, not I think what the CPC needs to avoid and what the town needs to avoid is funding projects, having properties acquired, and then running into not being able to execute a CR, because that would put us into a position that we've never been in, and we've successfully avoided, in having to recapture a clawback significant dollars from a project that couldn't fulfill its legislative intent. So you don't want the CR to be the 11th hour conversation that gets in the way. So I think doing this as much upfront would be great. Well, thank you. So I'm going to follow up on this co-ownership thing. I understand the issue capacity, but I think it would be really helpful to, if you all did pursue kind of what would a boilerplate look like. Maybe I can send to you, Mark, some ideas about process.
I'd like to know the CPC side of things.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been involved from the technical side, not the procurement side, so I'm probably not well versed in that, so that would be very helpful.
Very good.
Buddy, thank you very much. This has been very informative, at least for me it has. I've learned something tonight, and that's always a good thing.
Great. I really, really appreciate your time, and I'm confident we can work through this, but there's a couple of things we got to get in place. Great.
Thank you, buddy.
all. Take care.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Okay, Mark, now we can go to amending the 520. Well, I have bills first. Any bills?
Oh, we did those.
Okay.
No bills.
Amend the 12/5/23 minutes. What?
Yeah, let me explain this a little bit. As you know, we have been dealing with Mr. Higgins and his public records requests and open meeting violations and things like that. After we settled the previous open space violation, which we were in fact correct, he withdrew his complaint. He then made a public record request of 4 sets of minutes. And in working with town council, Anthony said that one of the requirements that we have never done specifically, I think we've done it in spirit, but not specifically. And if you notice tonight, I read the specific plan, who prepared it, what date, and the title. Every set of minutes, when you reference a plan that is a decision maker or a plan that is presented, you have to list it separately at the end of the minutes. So Mr. Higgins requested the minutes of December 2023 and January 2024. up to and not including tonight, because obviously the request was made several days ago. And so I took it upon myself to modify the 12-19 minutes, the January 9 and the January 16 minutes to reflect reference documents. The one I couldn't change was December 5th, because that was the one that had been voted on. We voted on December 19th tonight. We will be voting on January 9th and January 16th, the next meeting. So the amendment is to allow me to list the plans of record at the end of the minutes, which were the plans. I didn't name them specifically, but I did reference them in each motion. And in December, Patty was making the motion. She was always very adamant about the date of the plan. So just to add those plans to the end, that's the amendment. So I'm requesting authorization to do that from the commission at this point.
That makes sense. I don't think it's doing anything that we didn't already, as you said earlier, in spirit do. I mean, we had the plans before us in a sense, and you've always submitted the materials by email prior to the meetings so that we know what plans we're looking at. So I'll entertain a motion to authorize the Environmental Affairs Coordinator to amend our December 5, 2023 minutes to add reference to all the plans that were subject to our various votes at the end of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a seconded motion. Roll call. Joe?
Yes,
Jim?
Yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Nat?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously. You say wet signatures for the Solnier property CR?
Yes, we have in the office the wet signature sheet that I need your signatures on. I need a majority quorum of the commission. This is to authorize, this is to sign off on the Solnier property, which you have voted on and approved months ago. And Nick Wildman's here from DNRT listening in at this point. I just need to get your signatures and get those over to Nick so he can get that CR finalized.
Okay, so that's over on the table in the office?
It will be tomorrow morning. It's sitting on my desk right now.
I'll see if I can get there tomorrow. I know I can get there Thursday morning, but I'll see if I can get there tomorrow.
Yeah, I will too.
Okay, they'll be there first thing. I get in at 8:30. They'll be there by 8:45, 9 o'clock.
Okay. We've already had Buddy Baker. Anything new on the bylaws?
Well, yes and no. We were supposed to have a revised bylaw language from town council. I'm gonna summarize real quickly. If you recall, at the last meeting, we were talking about how buffer zone and the -3 and the -2 and the bylaw, how we just could not merge them together. And I had indicated to you that I had put together a working draft, which I had submitted to you folks for review. I didn't get much comment on it, but I think Kyle was the one who asked the question. Has town council looked at it? And I said I had sent it to them, but I haven't heard from him. After the meeting, I had a conversation with Brian, and he actually liked that addendum document. He said he was gonna doctor up some language a little bit, but the context of it, he said, could work and could work without really amending the intent of the bylaw as it was written and as it has been amended. So having not seen his comments at this point, I'm thinking we're a lot closer than we thought we were back on the 16th or the 9th, whenever we had that discussion, that previous discussion. So I'm awaiting those revisions. and I will pass them along to you. As far as I was concerned, his comments on the addendum, I had no problem with. And from what we discussed, I thought we were pretty close on the bylaw language without making major changes. And I know, Mike, you were very, very concerned about the changes and how it would affect, other activities, that precedent may have been set before, and now we're just changing things and changing what we do. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think we're gonna.
Like I said, I'll stand by what I said before. I feel very strongly that we tried to comply with some of the recommendations of town council, and when I saw what was sent to me, it gave me pause for concern, because if there's a concern that by doctoring or tinkering or amending, however you want to phrase it, our bylaws, we're weakening the town's position in the future on certain projects. I want to be darn sure that nothing that we propose town meeting hasn't been blessed by town council, because the last thing I want is for the folks in town to say conservation commissioners just undercut our ability to stop a particular project. And look, we've been working on this for a long time, okay? And frankly, so is town council. So when those little blurbs came my way, it was somewhat stunning, okay? It's like, why doesn't this get said before? Why didn't town council take a more active role then? And so I'm a little concerned, okay? And I still am. And so to hear that town council said it's great, it's fine. I want to see it in writing, okay? Because I want to have
I'm just telling you what my discussions with town council were.
listen, I don't challenge you, Mark.
No, I'm not defensive here.
Okay.
I'm just trying to.
I just want us to have in our work product, how we develop this. I want it to be clear that every step we sought town council's input. And we're gonna have to sometimes, I think, and even on this, okay, I'd like to see it in writing, put it in the file, keep it in the file, so that in the future, when people look back and say, well, all right, why did you clowns do this? I want to say, we didn't do it by ourselves. We didn't just make this up. I want to have that protection for us, for this commission. We never did it on our own. Okay, we never said it's going to be what we want and we're just going to push it through. We did seek, and we did get outside advice. And I just want to be sure, though, that there's no ambiguity, that this commission didn't act alone, didn't act without legal advice, didn't act without contemplation of what they were doing. That's all. And I wanted to be real clear. I'm not challenging Mark. All right. If that was the import of what I said the first time, I apologize. That was not what I.
No, I never took it that way. No, I'm just reporting to you what the discussions were. And unfortunately, the discussions are largely between me and Brian right now.
Right. No, and I think that's fine. I would like Brian to put his comments, his opinions in writing. Give us his language in writing, like he's already done with one version. I just want to make sure that we're proceeding with due deliberation. Sometimes I think if we were writing the US Constitution, we'd still be under British rule, but that's besides the point. We have to do it the right way.
Right. Well, Brian was sick last week. He contracted COVID in the beginning of the week. That set him back. So I anticipate we're going to be getting something fairly shortly.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing it.
Yep.
Any new enforcement issues?
No.
Whoa, all right. Well, I have no other item that I want to bring before the commission.
Mr. Chair, could I just say one thing before we
Yes,
wrap
you may.
up?
Sure, Carl.
Since it's public knowledge now, I just want to let the commission know that I have pulled papers to run for school committee. I wasn't planning on it, but a few groups came to me late in the weekend and said they had nobody. So where I got young kids, I felt compelled to pull papers, and we'll see where it goes. But I just wanted to let you guys know.
Well, I certainly think that you would be a good addition to the school committee rather. But I know what that means. If you actually win the election and you are on the school committee, you'll probably have no time to be on the Conservation Commission as well.
Unfortunately, and you know, I got 3 under 12. So again, like I said, I people asked, and I'm a sucker for punishment, I guess.
Well, look,
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact you give us this advance heads up. That just makes it all the more imperative that we get a replacement for Patty sooner rather than later, because if we lose Kyle as well, we're gonna have a heck of a time transacting business. You know, will mean that most of our, all the commissioners will have to show up all the time and vote. Otherwise, we won't have a quorum.
Oh, you got me for at least a few months. So
Well,
But,
I know
yeah.
that, but that's, you're giving us enough advance notice, and as I said, it puts the imperative on replacing Patty.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, it takes us a while. We get applicants. We have to review them. The select board has to review. It's a month and a half to 2 months from somebody handing up somebody a piece of paper to somebody getting voted in. So, I mean, we just need to deal with that. And while we're on that subject, fiscal year is ending June 30th. Anybody who's up for reappointment, because their term is expiring, I don't have that information right at my fingertips. But you should check that out and make sure that your term doesn't expire in 2024. If so, you have to submit a letter of interest.
Yeah, I think I'm good, but
I think there are a couple of 2024s I should have looked. I just wrote the town report, and it's in that. I can get the information and get it to you quickly.
okay. Yeah, it might be a good idea, Mark, just to send a private message to
Will
whoever
do.
these are, so they can, if they want to stay on the commission, which I hope
Yep.
they do, they put their letter of interest in.
But certainly, you know, as I said last time, if you know people, I mean, I don't live in town, so I don't know that many people. But if you know somebody who's a quality candidate, you know, try to talk them into it. I know we were discussing Jackie and Nat. I think you said you had been talking to somebody who might be interested. So yeah, we gotta do that.
I did pitch it to somebody today. He was going to talk to his wife and get back to me. And if he ends up being interested, I'll tell him to write the chairman and you, Mark.
Okay, fair enough.
Very, very good. Thank you. And hey, good luck on your campaign.
Yeah, good luck.
Try again. Thank you.
Yeah, I commend you for being willing to take that on. And I'm glad to know people like you are going for it. So best of luck.
Thank you.
We
Thank you.
need people like you, Kyle.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, on that cheerful note, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn
So move.
Second.
with a seconded motion. Roll call vote. Joe,
Yes.
Jim. You're muted, Jim. I'm sorry.
Jim, you're muted.
Yes.
There you go.
Kyle,
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
You guys.
and I'm a yes.